The morning I found the basement door standing open, I almost didn't think anything of it. It was a Tuesday, just past 6, and the light was still gray and thin across the kitchen floor. I'd been up since 5, the way I always am, the way your body just decides after a certain age that sleep is something other people get to have. I'd made my coffee, fed the cat, stood at the window watching the maple in the backyard drip from the night's rain. Everything felt ordinary. Everything felt like any other morning in the 31 years I'd lived in this house. Then I walked into the hallway and saw it. The basement door, cracked open maybe 4 inches, the darkness below it absolute and still. I stood there for a long moment with my coffee mug warm between both hands. I knew I had not opened that door. I knew it the way you know your own name, the way you know the sound of your own heartbeat. I had not been in that basement in 2 weeks, not since I'd gone down to get the extra folding chairs before my book club met. I had pulled the door shut behind me. I had heard the latch click, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Because the basement door is the end of the beginning, not the beginning. And to understand why it made my hands go cold around that mug, why my mouth went dry in a way that had nothing to do with the early hour, you need to know what happened 3 days before that morning. You need to know about the woman I met at Harmon's grocery, and what she said to me before I left. I had gone in for nothing remarkable. Bread, the good sourdough they bake on Sundays and sell through Wednesday before it's gone. Some Greek yogurt, a bottle of the ginger dressing my granddaughter likes when she visits. I remember the store was quieter than usual for a Monday afternoon, just the hum of the refrigerator cases and some soft country music coming from the back near the deli. I found the bread, found the yogurt, and I was standing in the salad dressing aisle trying to remember whether I already had ginger dressing at home or whether I'd used the last of it, when I heard something fall. It was a few feet behind me. A soft crash, not dramatic, just the sound of something hitting linoleum. I turned and saw an older woman, older than me, which put her somewhere past 75, crouched down on one knee, reaching for a jar of olive oil that had rolled against the bottom shelf. She was trying to get up and couldn't quite manage it. Her cart was parked at an angle beside her, and her purse had slid off the handlebar and the contents had spilled, coins and a folded grocery list, and her reading glasses skidding across the floor. I set my basket down and went over. "Let me get that," I said. I picked up the jar of olive oil first and set it in her cart. Then I gathered her glasses, her coins, her grocery list, her lipstick, the little packet of tissues, all of it, and I handed her purse back to her once she'd gotten herself upright again. She was embarrassed. I could tell by the way she waved her hand and said it wasn't necessary. She was fine. She was just clumsy today. But she was also grateful. You can always tell the difference. Her name was Dolores. She told me that unprompted, as though she felt she owed me at least that much. She had white hair cut short around her ears and the kind of face that had been beautiful once and had settled into something better, something knowing, something that had survived things. She was buying olive oil and canned tomatoes and a bag of the small, sweet potatoes. She mentioned she'd been meaning to make her mother's soup recipe and hadn't made it in years, and today felt like the day. We walked to the checkout together. I don't know why exactly, we just did. The way sometimes you fall into step with someone, and it feels like the most natural thing in the world. She told me she'd lived in Claremont for 40 years. I told her I'd been here 31. We talked about the new stoplight on Belmont Avenue and whether it helped or made things worse, and we agreed it made things worse. I paid for my groceries. We were out in the parking lot, and I was fishing for my keys when she put her hand on my arm. Not grabbing, not startling. "Can I tell you something?" she said. I looked at her. Her eyes were serious in a way they hadn't been inside, the lightness gone out of them, replaced by something careful and considered. "Of course," I said. "Your daughter-in-law?" she said. "After she leaves this week, don't move anything from your basement." I stared at her. The afternoon light was flat and white behind her. The parking lot sounds ordinary around us, a cart rolling, a car starting somewhere. She looked at me steadily, like she was waiting to see if I understood. "I'm sorry," I said. "How do you know?" "I know your son," she said. "I know his wife better than I wish I did. She grew up down the street from my daughter." She paused. "I can't say more than that. But please, whatever is down there when she leaves, don't touch it. Don't move it. Just leave it exactly as it is." Then she squeezed my arm once and walked to her car. I stood there, in the Harmon's parking lot, for what felt like a long time. My bag of groceries in my hand, the ginger dressing inside it pressing against my leg. I watched her get into a blue sedan and drive away, and I thought, that was real. That just happened. And then, because the mind is a remarkable thing, the part of my mind that wanted everything to be ordinary said, she must have been confused. She must have had me mixed up with someone else. People get things confused. She was older. She'd just fallen in the grocery store. She was having a hard day. I drove home. I put the groceries away. I didn't go down to the basement. I told myself it was because I had no reason to, not because I was afraid of what I might find. My daughter-in-law had arrived on Saturday. Her name is Courtney. She is 38 years old, and she has been married to my son, Daniel, for 9 years. And in those 9 years, I have spent a considerable amount of energy trying to love her the way a mother-in-law should love the woman her son has chosen. I have tried and I have come close sometimes. There are things about her that are genuinely good. She is organized and efficient, and she keeps a beautiful house, and she is a dedicated mother to my 2 grandchildren. I have held on to those things, but there have been other things. Small things at first, the kind you dismiss because you don't want to be the difficult mother-in-law, the kind you explain away because every family has friction, and friction is not malice. She began managing Daniel's schedule in ways that made it hard for him to visit. She handled the family finances, which I understood. But it had evolved over the years into something Daniel seemed vague and apologetic about when money came up. She spoke about my house with the careful neutrality of someone who had already decided something about it. She called it a lot of space for one person. She called it a project. The house had been in my husband Robert's family. Robert passed 6 years ago. It is mine, fully mine, paid off years ago. No question of that. She had called 2 weeks earlier and asked if she could come alone for a few days while Daniel took the children to his college roommate's place for a long weekend. She said she needed some quiet. She said she'd been exhausted and just wanted to sit on my porch and sleep, and she hoped that was all right with me. I said yes. Of course I said yes. She was family. She arrived Saturday afternoon with 1 bag and a bottle of wine, and she was warmer than usual, almost soft, the way people get when they want something or have already gotten it. We had dinner on the porch Friday night. I realize I'm getting my days confused because the anxiety has a way of shuffling the timeline in my memory, and she asked thoughtful questions about my health and whether I was happy in the house on my own, and had I thought at all about what I wanted for the future. She said it with such genuine seeming concern that I found myself actually talking about it, about the loneliness, some of it, about the upkeep, about how some mornings the house felt very large. She left Monday morning, kissed me on the cheek, told me to rest, told me she loved the visit, and we needed to do it more often. The basement door was open Tuesday morning. I set my coffee mug down on the hallway table. I stood at the top of the stairs and I listened. Nothing. No sound from below. Just the particular cold that basements hold even in September. Drifting up through the crack, I thought about Dolores's hand on my arm. Don't move anything from your basement. I did not go down. I left the door exactly as I found it, 4 inches open, and I went back to the kitchen and I sat at my table and I thought very carefully. The thinking took most of the morning. Some of it I'm not proud of. There was a part of me that wanted to call Daniel right then and ask him what was happening, ask him what Courtney was doing, ask him to explain it to me. That part of me was the mother part. The part that still believed my son would give me a straight answer. The part that hadn't been watching carefully enough over the past 9 years to understand that Daniel's answers came filtered through someone else now. Instead, I called my neighbor, Patricia. Patricia is 67, and she was a paralegal for 22 years, and she is the most practically intelligent person I know. I told her what had happened. All of it. The parking lot, and Dolores, and the basement door. I told her in order, carefully, because I wanted to hear myself say it out loud and know whether it sounded as serious as it felt. Patricia was quiet for a moment when I finished. Then she said, "Don't touch anything, not a single thing. But you need to go down there and look. You need to know what you're dealing with before you can deal with it." She said, "Don't move anything," I said. "Looking isn't moving," Patricia said. "Look. Photograph everything exactly as it is, then close the door and call me back." I went down. My basement is half finished. The back half open concrete with the water heater and the old furnace and shelving units I've had since the children were small. The front half has carpet and a couch and the old television Robert used to watch games on and boxes, years of boxes. My family's life in cardboard and packing tape. Moving boxes from 2 different houses. Christmas decorations. Things belonging to both my children that they swore they'd come back for. Everything looked normal at first. I stood at the bottom of the stairs and turned on the overhead light and just scanned the room. Then I saw the corner behind the old armchair. There were 3 boxes there that I did not recognize. They were not my boxes. They were not the battered, tape-reinforced boxes I'd lived with for years, labeled in my handwriting or Robert's or my daughter Ellen's. They were newer, clean cardboard, recently closed, the tape bright and fresh. 3 of them, stacked, set back against the wall behind the armchair in a spot you wouldn't see, unless you came all the way to the bottom of the stairs and looked deliberately. I took photographs. I took 12 of them from different angles. The boxes in the corner, the chair in front of them, the shelving unit beside them, the way the floor looked undisturbed between the stairs and the chair, but disturbed behind it, a slight scuff in the concrete dust. I photographed the stairs themselves. I photographed the door at the top from the bottom, noting the way it sat in its frame, the way the latch mechanism looked. Then I went back upstairs, closed the door gently, exactly as I'd found it, and called Patricia. She was quiet again while I described what I'd seen. "All right," she said finally. "Here's what you're not going to do. You're not going to open those boxes. You're not going to call Daniel. Not yet." She paused. "Do you know anyone who does home security? Someone who can put a camera in down there without it being obvious?" I did know someone. My next-door neighbor on the other side, Frank, had put cameras in around his house 2 years ago after a break-in on our street. He'd offered at the time to help me do the same. I'd said maybe someday. I called him within the hour. Frank came over at noon. He is practical and quiet, and he asked no questions I didn't volunteer answers to. He put a small camera on the shelving unit, aimed at the corner with the boxes, tucked behind an old lamp base, where you would not see it unless you knew to look. It fed to an app on my phone. He set it up and tested it and showed me how to view the footage, and then he left, and I stood in my kitchen and looked at the live feed of my own basement on a screen 3 inches wide. I looked at those 3 boxes in the corner of the screen, and I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Not fear exactly, something older and quieter than fear. The understanding that something had been happening in my house, in my life, while I wasn't watching, and that it had probably been happening for longer than 3 days. I didn't sleep much that Tuesday night. I lay in my bed in the dark, and I thought about Dolores. I thought about the 9 years of small things I had explained away. I thought about the conversations about the house, the future, one person and all this space. I thought about the times Courtney had asked Daniel to handle something at my house, and Daniel had come over and taken an inventory of the water heater's age, the roof's condition, The electrical panel. At the time, I'd thought it was care. I had called it consideration. Wednesday morning, I called my daughter, Ellen, in Phoenix. Ellen is 3 years younger than Daniel, and she and Courtney have never been easy with each other, which I had also, in my endless desire for peace, explained away. I called Ellen, and I told her everything. Ellen said, "Mom, I've been waiting for you to call me about this for 2 years." She said it gently. She wasn't accusing me, but the words sat in my chest like stones. She told me about a conversation she'd had with her own friend, who happened to know a woman who dealt with a similar situation, a daughter-in-law, a property that had been in the family, documents that appeared, a process that could be set in motion without the elder member of the family fully understanding what was being signed or established. She said there were people who specialized in this, who looked for this, who had made it a kind of enterprise. "It's her I'm worried about," Ellen said, "not Daniel. I don't think Daniel knows everything she's doing, but I think he knows some of it." That was the hardest thing to sit with, that my son might know some of it. I called a lawyer that afternoon, a woman named Sandra who had done our estate planning when Robert was still alive. I explained the situation and sent her the photographs from my phone. She told me not to touch the boxes. She told me to document everything. Every day, every entry, any vehicle in the driveway I didn't recognize. She told me she was going to make some calls. Thursday passed. Friday passed. I watched the basement camera feed on my phone, the way you watch something you can't look away from, even when nothing is happening. Nothing was happening. The boxes sat exactly where they were. The door stayed closed. Saturday morning, Daniel called. He said he was thinking of coming by Sunday with the kids. He mentioned, just in passing, that Courtney might stop in briefly too. His voice had the particular careful quality it gets when he's navigating something. I know my son's voice in all its registers. "That would be lovely," I said. I said it easily. I was surprised by how easily it came. After I hung up, I sat very still at the kitchen table, and I looked at my hands. 63 years old. 31 years in this house. Robert's family's house. Robert's name still on the framed photographs on the mantel. Robert's toolbox still on the workbench in the garage. My life? Accumulated slowly and with enormous love and a certain amount of ordinary grief and all the complexity that any real life contains. I was not going to lose it. Not through inattention. Not through politeness. Not because I had spent so many years trying to be the easy mother-in-law that I had trained myself not to see what was in front of me. I called Sandra back. I told her, Sunday. She was ready. They arrived at 11 in the morning. My grandchildren came barreling up the porch steps the way they always do. Maya first, she's 7, and then Thomas at 5, already calling for me before the car door was fully open. I held them, and I breathed them in, and I felt something settle in my chest that had been unsettled for a week. Whatever happened today, they were still mine in the way that mattered. That part was not in the boxes in the basement. Daniel hugged me. He looked tired. He looked like someone who had been carrying something heavier than usual and was hoping no one would ask him about it. Courtney came up the porch steps behind them. She was smiling, the warm smile, the visiting smile. She had her bag over her shoulder, and she was wearing a blue blouse I'd actually complimented once, and the sight of it made me feel something sharp and sad at the same time. "It's so good to see you," she said, and leaned in to kiss my cheek. We had coffee. The children ran in the backyard. Daniel and I talked about Thomas's new teacher and Maya's soccer and whether the drive had been bad. It was all so ordinary. It was so exactly like dozens of other Sunday mornings that I could feel my own nerve beginning to soften. Feel the explanatory part of my brain begin to work. Maybe there's an innocent reason for those boxes. Maybe I've made this into something it isn't. Maybe Dolores was confused after all. Then Courtney said she'd left something in the car and would be back in a minute. and I watched through the kitchen window as she walked not to the car but to the side gate that leads to the back of the house, to the basement window. I picked up my phone and texted Sandra. Now. Sandra had made calls to someone she trusted at the county assessor's office. She had been very quiet and very thorough all week. She had found what she was looking for. A document, filed the previous Thursday, describing a storage arrangement, a legal instrument, with language she described to me as the first step in a process designed to establish a competing claim to a property. It had my name on it. Not my signature, my name, printed on a document that appeared to be working towards something I had never agreed to. Courtney came back inside 5 minutes later. She sat back down with her coffee and said something to Daniel about the yard looking nice. She was perfectly composed. I was also, by then, perfectly composed. Sandra arrived at 12:15, which Courtney had not been expecting. Sandra is in her late 50s, and she wears her silver hair back, and she has the particular energy of someone who has walked into rooms where she was not wanted many times, and found it unremarkable. She shook Daniel's hand. She shook Courtney's hand. She sat down. "I want to talk about the filing from Thursday," Sandra said. "What happened next I will not describe in every detail, because some of it belongs to my family, and not to anyone else. And because some of it was painful in ways that don't require witnesses." Daniel's face, when he understood the scope of it. The way the composure left Courtney's face, not all at once, but in stages, like watching something structural fail. The conversation that was not one conversation but several conversations, and not all of them finished that day. What I will say is this. Those boxes in my basement contained records. Courtney's records, her planning, the outline of something that had been in motion for almost a year. The document filed Thursday would have been the foundation of a case that my property should be in a trust managed jointly, a trust that in its language and structure would have given her functional control of decisions about it. The lawyer she'd used had been careful, and the language was technical, and it was the kind of thing that, if I had not been warned, if I had moved those boxes, if I had disturbed the evidence of her presence before I understood what I was dealing with, might have been much harder to untangle. Dolores had known. I still don't fully understand how much she knew, or how, only that she did, and that she chose a parking lot in the middle of a Monday afternoon to tell a woman she'd never met because she had seen what this kind of thing does to a family, and she could not stand to see it happen again. I sent her a card. Eventually. I found her through a mutual connection that took several weeks to trace. I wrote simply that she had been right, and that I was grateful, and that her mother's soup recipe should be made as often as possible. She sent a card back with just 3 words. "I'm so glad. It is 6 months later now as I'm telling you this. The legal matter is resolved. The document has been rescinded. Courtney and Daniel are working through something in their marriage that I am not part of, that is not mine to solve, that is the consequence of choices made by 2 adults over many years. I love my son. I am still learning what that love looks like now. In this new shape things have taken. We talk on Sundays, usually. It is a beginning. Maya and Thomas were here last weekend. Maya helped me plant bulbs along the front walk, tulips and some crocus, the kind that come up in early April without being asked. Thomas wanted to know what was in the basement, and I told him old Christmas things, and he immediately wanted to go down and look for the ornaments, and I said we'd save that for December, and he accepted this with the magnificent reasonableness of 5-year-olds. I stood on the porch and watched them in the yard, and the September light came through the maple the way it does at this time of year, slanted and gold, and I thought about all the things I had almost lost without knowing I was losing them. I think about Dolores often. The way she looked at me in that parking lot. Not urgent, not dramatic, just certain. The quiet authority of someone who knows something true and has decided to say it, even though saying it costs them something and benefits them nothing. I'd helped her pick up a few things off a grocery store floor. That was all. I hadn't thought twice about it. I'd done it because it was the ordinary right thing to do, the small human decency that a morning in a grocery store calls for, the thing that costs nothing. And yet, I walk past my basement door now, and I think about how much depends, sometimes, on the smallest moments, on whether you stop or keep walking, on whether you put your hand on someone's arm and tell them what you know, or whether you get in your car and drive away because it's not your problem and you don't want the complication. I am 63 years old and I have been a wife and a mother and a neighbor and a friend and a widow, and now, whatever this new version of me is, the one that knows how to sit still and be strategic and trust herself, I am still learning her. I think I will be learning her for a while, but the house is mine. The maple is still there. The porch still catches the evening light the way it always has. And somewhere across town, on some quiet street, an older woman named Dolores is probably making her mother's soup today. The small, sweet potatoes and the canned tomatoes and the good olive oil she was buying when she fell. And I hope it is exactly as she remembered it. I hope it is better. Drop your city or state in the comments and let me know you're watching. And if you've ever had someone tell you something you didn't want to hear that turned out to save you, I would love to hear your story.